Good morning, Scallywag Spoo here, and yes, I am still sick. Getting better. The fever is starting to break, so if I'm sweating profusely during this video, that's why. Healing and good things, so yeah. Going forward, I officially have come up with a title for what this new show is going to be. Basically going to kind of be similar to the show, except it's going to be just kind of me sharing opinions and going over kind of fun factual things about history and conspiracies and this stuff that we used to do. But it's just going to be me here, kind of doing it solo, and we're going to be calling it Mindless Drivel, because, well, that's pretty much how my brain works. But today we are covering part 2 of my beef with the Avengers Endgame. It's a fun watch. I would definitely recommend it to anybody. But at the same time, the movie had so many problems. And, of course, yesterday we went over pretty much how they broke their own rules through the movie and a couple of little tiny things. But today we're going to be going over all the other little things that bothered me. Some of it are just flaws with the movie, some of it is just questions that I have, but if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame, of course, there are going to be a lot of spoilers here, so what are you doing? You knew going into this that that's what we were doing, so look away, go watch the movie, and then come back, and then you can share your opinions with me. So to kick things off, I'm actually going to throw in a correction from yesterday's video, and that being Thor being without his hammer for the end of the Dark World and Age of Ultron and all that fun stuff. I totally forgot that when Cap went back in time to replace the stones, he did take Mjolnir with him, so let's just assume that that's not because he can hold it now and he actually gave it back to Thor. So, correction on that one, we'll forget about that, we will totally let that one slide, but it still doesn't fix all these other things. Complaint number 2, Captain Marvel. Yes, I'm still complaining about Captain Marvel's involvement, or lack thereof, in this movie. There is a scene in this movie where Natasha is talking to War Machine and Rocket and Captain Marvel and Okoye, and they're talking about just different things that are happening around the world. This is the scene where Okoye mentions earthquakes happening in the oceans under Wakanda, possibly setting up Namor. My question is this simply a throwaway line, or is that a setup for Namor? Because Captain Marvel says that the things that are happening on Earth are happening on other planets, and that's why she needs to leave. Is she talking about earthquakes, or is she just talking about civilization crumbling due to half of the population being gone? That is something I very much would like to have answered. Number 3! We've known for quite some time that either Bucky or Falcon would become the next Captain America once Chris Evans stepped down from the role. And of course it ended up with Cap handing the shield over to Falcon. Here's the problem with that. While it's great that Falcon will become the next Captain America and actually follow his arc from the comic book, he's not exactly a super soldier. You see, Captain America and Bucky both have enhanced everything, agility, strength. They are the perfect specimens of humans. Falcon, meanwhile, is a dude that has mechanical wings and guns. So, just because he's got a nice little frisbee shield, is he just going to die the first time he goes out there and fights somebody? Because he doesn't have the things like they have. He's just a guy. Speaking of Captain America and his trip back to replace the stones, why did we not get to see any of that? And how much of a problem did he have doing that? Both the Space Stone, the Power Stone, the Mind Stone, they were all within other things. The Space Stone was in the Tesseract. Thanos had to break it to get the Space Stone out. We never exactly found out how the Avengers got the Space Stone out of the Tesseract, but somehow it has to get put back in there and taken back to where he got it from. And this little trip back to replace the stones actually brings up 2 huge questions for me, both involving the Soul Stone. First of all, let's not forget who the keeper of the Soul Stone was. A guy by the name of Red Skull. And if you don't remember who Red Skull originally was, he was the main antagonist to Captain America. So what was that conversation like? You gotta imagine it was a little bit awkward, at least. And what exactly happens upon returning the Soul Stone? Does that mean you get your soul back that you traded for the stone to begin with? Does Natasha come back to life after he returns it? Of course, we know that the Black Widow movie is going to be a prequel because Natasha is dead now, and that the movie will take place sometime after the fall of the Soviet Union. But what do you get in exchange for the Soul Stone being returned? And speaking of Natasha being dead, this actually leads me to one of my other biggest beefs with this movie. If you have read the Infinity Gauntlet story from the comic books, any of those story arcs, because there's been several, then you know that once you've collected all the stones, you are basically God. Anything that you can possibly imagine, you can do. And yet in the MCU, all the Infinity Gauntlet seems to be capable of is either snapping out half of existence or bringing that same half of existence back to life in the current timeline. Professor Hulk actually says he tried to bring Natasha back to life, but was unable to do so. And according to the Russo Brothers, that if he had been able to do so, bringing back that soul would have cost them the Soul Stone and would have put all of existence at risk. We actually saw Thanos do more with individual stones during Infinity War than we've seen anybody do with the completed gauntlet in either movie. That is something that is not only a huge missed opportunity, but a huge flaw to begin with. The Infinity Gauntlet literally makes you God. Whatever you want, you can do. So if they wanted to bring people back to life 5 years ago, they could do that. If they wanted to say, hey, it is 5 years ago, they could do that. But no, it just brings the dusted back to life in the present time and nothing else, apparently. If you've watched any movie with time travel involved, then you know that it's a flawed concept. Time travel will either create a massive paradox, or it creates multiple new realities. The Russo brothers have actually established the fact that this movie did create several new realities. And obviously watching the movie, that's exactly what happened. My problem is that they spend a ton of time establishing the fact that you cannot change the past because time is linear, and then immediately broke those rules. One line of dialogue would have fixed the entire thing. But a lot of theories have actually popped up as a result of some of the time-traveling things that took place in this movie. A lot of those theories have to do with Captain America going back and living out his life with Peggy Carter. I, too, have a few questions involved in this one. First and foremost, so that would establish that there are actually two Captain Americas running around at any given time throughout history. The Russo brothers have actually confirmed, yes, that is the case. The biggest problem that I have is that previous movies have established that Peggy Carter was married to a man that Captain America saved. She says, he saved the life of the man who would go on to become my husband. And she says it kinda hesitantly. They also went to some pretty good lengths during the Agent Carter TV show to never introduce her husband. He was always a mystery. So does that mean that Captain America was always her husband, and that's why he was such a big secret? The way that they portrayed this secret would actually kind of lend itself to saying, yes, it was, and that's why he was always off in the shadows. The problem with that is that he actually made out with Sharon Carter, who, if this theory is correct, would actually be his daughter. Speaking of Sharon, if he did go back and he married Peggy and he wasn't the mysterious husband the entire time, does that mean that Sharon Carter was never born? Because Sharon Carter once saved Captain America's life during the events of the Winter Soldier. So if she was never born, she wasn't there to save his life, so Captain America actually died. New paradox! The next question I have is that now that time travel has been established as something that exists within the MCU, what happens next? Is time travel going to become the new cure-all? We need extra hands to fight Galactus or whoever. Let's go back and we'll get Captain America, we'll get Tony Stark, we'll get all these people that are no longer with us and we'll bring them back to our present time, have them help us fight this guy, and then we can always just put them back when we're done. Mark my words, I'm saying that at some point in time during the future MCU, Tony Stark will return. Even if it's just for one movie, even if it's just for one scene, he will be back and time travel will be involved. Speaking of time travel, and I mentioned Galactus, who's going to be the next big bad? While I feel that Galactus would actually make the most sense, because where do you go after someone as powerful as Thanos? Everybody except Galactus would pretty much be a step backwards. There are a few other possibilities. Since time travel has been established, one could always argue that Kang the Conqueror would actually be the next big bad. And if you watched Ant-Man and the Wasp, you know that there was an Easter egg lending itself to the existence of Kang. But who knows, that's just speculation. I, for one, hope that it is Galactus. And whenever they decide to introduce the idea of Galactus being the next big bad, I hope to God my idea for a scene to establish this, an after credits scene, and I've shared this a number of times, but I'll share it again, and this would be such a beautiful scene that the comic readers would be like, oh, and all the people that aren't comic readers would be like, what was that all about? The scene basically is, we're in a park just outside of a very futuristic city. You have a woman that is setting up a nice little picnic while a dad and child play off in the distance. Maybe the dad tosses something to the child before looking up to the sky, a very concerned look on his face. A shadow falls over the whole park, and the woman walks up, puts her hands on his shoulder, and says, Norrin, what is that? Cut to black. Everyone who's a fan of the comic books would be like, oh! And everybody else would be like, what's that supposed to mean? Norrin, being Norrin Rad, the Silver Surfer, the Herald of Galactus, it would be an awesome setup, just saying. But hold up! We're still talking about Endgame here. And I do have just a couple of little beefs left. And I know that most of these beefs are very nitpicky, especially the ones in this episode. But once you find one major flaw with something, then all the other little flaws start to stack up on top. Or at least they do with me. I could very well have some serious brain problems. But my number one beef with the movie is the fact that it didn't follow its own rules. And I'm not just talking about how time is linear and they can't change the past and then they did it anyway thing. The movie also established that in order to time travel, not only do you need the Pym particles, you also need a specialized time travel suit to, navigate the quantum realm. You also have to have like a GPS thing to find your way through the quantum realm. And you actually have to have the machine to do all of this with to begin with. With that in mind, how the hell did Thanos get to the present day? It makes sense how old Nebula replaced new Nebula in the present, but then we just see her push some buttons on a keyboard and suddenly Thanos' ship comes flying through the quantum realm. They never exactly bothered to explain, what's the word I'm looking for, how they did that. Oh, right, that's right, because we can't have a climax if we don't do that. That's pretty much how that worked. But all of those things aside, time travel, breaking of rules, all those things aside, I have two other problems with this movie. And one's not necessarily a problem as much as it is an annoyance, I guess. So I'll get that one out of the way first. We know that this is supposed to be the last Avengers movie. At least this incarnation of the Avengers. And perhaps that is why this entire movie felt like it was nothing but a setup for the Young Avengers. Which, while we do not have the official announcement of Phase 4 yet, is something they have said they want to do. Very first scene of the movie, we see Hawkeye training his daughter. In the comic books, Kate Bishop is supposed to be the new Hawkeye, but I think they'll probably end up going that route. Cassie Lang is now all grown up. She's a teenager now, and we know that she goes on to become Stature. Tony Stark has a daughter, and granted, she's only 5. But who shows up to Tony's funeral? That's right, Iron Man 3 kid, who the last time we saw him had just walked into his garage and had it completely decked out with Stark tech. Can we say Iron Lad? Say it with me now, kids. Iron Lad. Just a theory, but it felt extremely forced in there, especially his appearance, because he had nothing to do with the movie. He was just a cameo, and they didn't even tell us who he was in the movie. You just had to know, oh, that actor kid from Iron Man 3 is going to be in Avengers Endgame somewhere. We also know that Catherine Langford from 13 Reasons Why was cut from the movie. We were never told who it was she was going to be playing, but the theory is that she was going to actually be a grown-up version of Morgan Stark. Personally, I disagree with this theory because unless they went into the future or something, then she's just a 5-year-old. But she may still show up in the future, and she too is right there in that correct age to have been somebody set up for the Young Avengers. But like I said, that one is not really a complaint as much as it is just kind of, it felt a little forced at times when you realize that's what they're doing. But hey, maybe I'm wrong, in which case, hey, great. They were just characters that were there to be there, I guess, or something. But my number one complaint with the movie, and I briefly mentioned this yesterday, is in fact not the time travel thing. It's not the fact that it broke its own rules. It's the fact that Infinity War was such a tight movie. The fact that every single scene, every line of dialogue pressed the plot forward, and every single character had an arc of some sort. Some good, some bad, except for, you know, characters that weren't really all that important to the story. All of our major characters had an arc, including Thanos. This movie was almost the exact opposite. Yes, I understand that Tony Stark didn't have faith in anything at the beginning of the movie, and by the end, not only did he have faith, but he sacrificed himself. And yes, Captain America goes back and lives out his life, thus completing his story, and blah, 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 blah. I wouldn't really call those arcs. An arc is like a true change of person. Tony Stark has always been, I am Iron Man. He just came back to it at the end by saying that line again. Is it an arc? Sure, but not a very good one. In fact, I would go as far as to say that the only character who truly had a real arc in this movie is someone who wasn't even a major player in the movie. That being Pepper Potts. During the entire run of the MCU, going all the way back to Iron Man 1, Pepper has never fully been on board with Tony Stark being Iron Man. She always wanted him to be safe and do the smart thing and just be with her, and now especially because they have a family. But then comes the scene where Tony realizes that time travel is possible, and he, you know, comes up with the designs and whatnot. He tells Pepper, I can forget about this right now. I can sink this to the bottom of the lake and I can go to bed. And she says, but would you rest? Fast forward to the end of the movie where Tony is dying. She comforts Spider-Man and has him step aside, and she steps in and she says to him, we're going to be okay. You can rest now. And that didn't click in my head at first, but when it did, oh, the feels. Oh, the feels that came as a result of that line being repeated. So yes, Pepper got the biggest arc out of anybody in that movie, and she's in it for all of what, 5, 6, 7 minutes? And that bothers me more than the time travel thing does. But there you have it. Those are kind of my beefs with Avengers Endgame. There's a lot of them, and I know I'm rambling on, and that's okay. That's kind of what I do. I'm good at going on tangents, and this gives me an outlet for that. And if you disagree with my opinions, hey, that's why they're called opinions, and that's why everyone has one, and they're kind of like... But anyway, feel free to share your opinions in the comments below. Continue to comment, like, share, and subscribe, and gonna take a week or so to kind of figure some things out here and get over this this nastiness and this fever and stuff. But when we return, Mindless Drivel is going to be the name of this show. It's going to be probably getting back to doing a Monday through Friday thing, or at least I'd like to. At the very least, we'll be doing 2-3 videos a week. So definitely subscribe so you don't miss out on that. And if you have an idea for a show, drop it in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you soon.